Hey guys, welcome to Cooking with Chase. Hope you're enjoying your forced staycation. Today we're making fish and chips, so let's grab a drink and get cooking. Want to give a shout out to Ashley and Quinn, who I made this for when we were on vacation there, so this is one of their favorites. Fish and chips. So today we're actually just making the fish component of fish and chips. There's not quite enough time to kind of go over the whole process of making french fries. So if you're making this, just put it alongside a salad, or maybe we'll cover french fries in a future video. But yeah, we're just going to do tartar sauce and how to fry up some nice fish at home today. So let's talk about the fish first. This is haddock. I picked this up today, and this is not particularly great looking fish. So this is the best I could find in the store. That happens sometimes. That's the nature of cooking. It's okay. The fish itself is not bad. It was just handled really poorly. So you can see at this end it's all kind of torn up and in pieces. That's just the nature of ingredients sometimes and the way they are. So instead of kind of getting bummed out and deciding to do something different, I thought this would be a good opportunity to go over how you can kind of take something that looks a little rough, cut it up properly, and end up with something that looks really nice at the end. So, like I said, this is haddock. When you're doing fish and chips, you want to use a nice mild whitefish. So kind of think haddock, think halibut, which is quite a bit more expensive, but also quite nice. Cod is usable. Cod tends to be a little bit tougher, so you're going to want to go a little smaller or thinner on your slices. But all of those fishes will work great. So when you're thinking about frying fish, what's actually happening to the fish is it's getting enclosed in a batter. The batter is cooking and the inside is steaming. So for that fish to cook evenly, the same amount of time, our goal is to cut it so it's all similar pieces. Similar thickness along here and similar width along here. That's kind of the goal when you're cutting it. What you're not looking for is something that's thin like this at the tail, right? And then very thick in the belly. This is obviously going to cook much quicker than a piece like this. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. We're not aiming for, if we were in a restaurant, we'd be aiming for weight and portion size, trying to get that dialed in for food costs. At home, your only goal is to just get your pieces as consistent as possible, so when it cooks evenly. And it doesn't really matter if they're smaller or bigger. It's actually kind of nice to have smaller pieces because you end up with more breading. And breading is kind of the nicest part. So I'm just going to move the ingredients to the tartar sauce off to the side. We're just going to quickly slice up this fish. So I did 2 already, and this is an example I kept of what wouldn't work. So if you look at this, very thick all along here, and then it really skims out along the tail. So that, you just kind of cut off that piece, so you end up with something that's quite nice and consistent. We're not throwing any of this out. We're going to keep that for stir fry, as soup, any number of things. I'm going to turn down the heat on my oil a little bit. Again, with this one, I'd be looking at this and take something about there, B1, and again, just to trim off the tail to get something kind of even. This is the bigger one. This is kind of falling off. We'll slice that off. Here. Very thin along the edge here. We'll just trim that off into something nice there. Perfect. And this one is honestly so torn up, and there's only 2 of us eating this, that I'm just going to keep this piece for some soup or stir fry, something along that. I'm not going to worry too much about this guy. There's more than enough for me and Ty there. So I'm going to put this off to the side. Wash your hands. I'm going to wash my board. So the first restaurant I ever worked in, where I was the line cook on line, was in Halifax in 2010. A place called Stainer's Wharf, and it specialized in fish and chips. And it was a big learning experience, but we did, I think our peak was around Canada Day. We were doing like upwards of 500 pieces fish and chips a day during that peak summer hours. It was pretty intense. Okay, so tartar sauce. Incredibly easy to make at home. It's basically, in its simplest form, sweet relish and mayo. Now, we're going to do it the grown-up version, we'll say of that. So I've got an actual dill pickle we're going to mince up, some fresh lemon, some fennel, and some parsley. These, totally optional. If you have dry fennel will go in there. If you have fresh fennel, fronds, or dill, these are fennel fronds. I keep mixing them up. So fennel fronds taste like dill. It's the same flavor profile. So these, again, they were taken from the restaurant when we had to close. They wouldn't keep. And fresh parsley. So these two can get mixed in to kind of elevate your tartar sauce. If you don't have them, not a big deal. And like I talked about in the burger episode for the secret sauce, a little bit of this pickle brine. So the brine from the pickle holds an incredible amount of flavor because it's a vinegar, number one. It's got all these flavoring agents to flavor the pickle, but then what happens when it's sitting in the liquid is the pickle's pulling out flavor into the brine. So it's got all that nice cucumber, vegetal kind of taste to it. So you can use this a lot in salad dressings, tartar sauce, dressings for burgers, a lot of things. So don't throw out that pickle brine there. Okay, so into cup-ish of mayo, tablespoon or so of pickle brine. I'm going to quickly dice up this pickle. And you want to go fairly small with this. If you have to go bigger, that's fine. But kind of go as small as you can. You're just going to do that by going lengthwise of the pickle. And with this kind of cut until you're comfortable. It's not worth cutting yourself. This is an incredibly unstable cut. So you see it's rounded at the bottom. There's no where to balance it. So at this point, if you're kind of newer to knife skills, just put this to the side. Use it on a sandwich or something like that. If you are a little bit more experienced and you want some more practice, what you can do is place your knife and cut it along there. That's the safest way to make that cut because you're on a flat surface. Okay, and then you're going to do these. Just because they're the ends and there's a lot of skin, I tend not to use in sauces. And with these, you're just going to take them, run your knife along down there. Try to keep those as neat as you can because we're just going to turn this pile. And then we're just going to go through and finely dice this. And it makes this beautiful, translucent, iridescent kind of, that's a lot of times from the turmeric in your pickles. But just a lot more fresh, a lot more vibrant than using a store-bought relish. And it's about a pickle. That's enough. You know, you can go heavier, you can go less. It's very much depending on what you have, what you enjoy your tastes to be, and all that stuff. Wash my hands real quick. There. Okay, so mix this up. Now we're gonna add a squeeze of some lemon juice. I'm just gonna do one for now until we taste it. And we're gonna do some herbs. I'm gonna save some of this fennel fronds or dill for garnish. There, like that. And you just mash up all these herbs together. They're getting chopped up anyway. Just roll them in a tight thing, in a tight little ball. Run your knife through them. And again, we talked about this in earlier videos. Don't worry that your cut isn't perfect. You're cooking at home. It's not the end of the world if there's a little bit, if a piece of herb is bigger than another piece of herb. You know, we're not cooking for a fancy restaurant. You're cooking for friends and family. Your knife skills will come. All of this will come with time, right? You don't have a chef yelling at you to make everything perfect or anything like that. So just Just worry on the ingredients, cooking them with some care. The perfection will come. So we've got this. Gonna give this a quick mix. And we're tasting all along as we go. So once I combine this, I'm gonna give it a taste, see where we're at for seasoning, because we've added more acid. So we might have to counteract that with a bit more salt. Even though our mayo is already seasoned and there's already quite a bit of salt in the pickles, we just won't know until we have tried it. Yep, so it definitely needs a shot of lemon juice. Definitely needs another shot of salt. It definitely needs some pepper. Do that to combine. So we're just going to set this in the fridge. This can be made up to 3 days ahead of time. Just cover in your fridge. It'll actually be better. All those flavors will kind of marry together and get a little bit more cohesive. So now we're going to talk about our batter. So, my oil was starting to smoke, so it was getting too hot. So I just pulled off my oil to kind of let it cool. Get a chance to chill out so I didn't start a grease fire or anything like that. So we're going to talk about our batter. Tons of different styles of batters. People have a lot of opinions on them. It's regional. This is my thoughts on it. You can look up 1,000 different recipes online if you want an exact recipe on this. I prefer more of a tempura batter. Than kind of a thick English style batter. So to get that thinner batter, there's actually cornstarch in here. So it's about roughly a 1-to-1 ratio of all-purpose flour to cornstarch. And so this has roughly a cup of flour, a cup of cornstarch, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of black pepper. And you're just going to whisk those into dry ingredients to combine. Take a sip of beer. And the reason why you always whisk your dry ingredients before you add your wet is to make sure that everything's mixed really homogeneously. You don't want lumps of your baking soda or your baking powder over here that gets caught up in your egg or your beer and then doesn't mix in correctly. So you want to get this to be a nice, even amount of ingredients, and then we're going to talk about adding our wet. So this, again, I always like to do a little well and then spill some flour on the floor. In the center.
Baking soda or baking powder? Which one did you say? Powder.
Powder. Rub my nose here. We got a new light for the kitchen. It is hot in here. Let me tell you that much. So, I always do a little well in the beginning, just like if you were making pasta. This avoids, if you ever mix like pancake batter, and you get like the center of your whisk is all filled with like dry dough, and you're trying to incorporate it, and you've got like batter mix in here, this avoids that. So what you're going to do is just create this little well, and all your wet's going to go in there. And then as we're whisking it, we're slowly going to pull more and more dry ingredients into the mix. And that's going to keep it really smooth and without that giant block of batter in the middle here. So create a little well. Again, get some flour on your floor. Crack an egg. That is hilarious. Okay. So, sometimes you have cooked sous vide eggs in your fridge from a restaurant that you work at that just closed, and you don't label them. And then when you go to put a raw egg into your batter, instead you put a cooked egg, and then you scoop it out ever so delicately, you throw that out, you walk over, wash your hands, and then you go get a raw egg. And that's why you label things in your fridge. Fantastic. Okay. This is all an excuse to get the beer out of the fridge for the batter. That's all it was, guys. It's all planned. Professional. Okay, crack a raw egg into your batter. Break that up. Start whisking that in. And you're just till it's broken. And then you can use whatever beer you have. A brown ale, it's quite nice. It has a lot of nuttiness, a lot of flavor, it's really good. You want to use something that's drinkable, obviously. But I'm drinking Pabst, so the threshold is very low. If you don't drink alcohol or you have kids and you're worried about the liquor in it, I mean, honestly, the beer will cook out in the process. You can use carbonated water or sparkling water, something like that. Avoid things with lots of sugar, like cider or like even Sprite. If you think that would, because the sugar in that will burn in the fryer, and you'll end up with a really dark, really awful batter. Yeah, you're just going to add your beer, and you can work this quite vigorously. You don't have to worry about knocking the air out of the beer or anything like that. There's enough little bubbles in there, and there's enough baking powder that is okay. I can already tell I'm going to need more liquid. But you can see the nice golden color of this from the egg yolk, from the brown beer. And you can see that my whisk is clean. There's no lumps in it. That's what you get when you start with the well in the beginning. So again, you're just working this, getting all the flour in. Okay, now we can talk about consistency. This again is a personal preference. Some people like a thicker batter on their thing. I like a really, really light batter on my fish, especially if you have a smaller piece of fish. The smaller your fish, the lighter you want to go in your batter. Just because there's not a lot of meat to fight the flavor of the batter. So again, smaller your fish, thinner your batter tends to work better. And this is more of a tempura, which is super, super thin. And I think a lot of people are worried about it being too thin and not cooking correctly or not doing anything like that. So they go too thick and you end up with a very doughy batter. You can see this. This is what they call it's holds a stream. So you see when I pick it up, it's an unbroken stream. It means there's enough integrity to the liquid that's holding together as it falls, but it's still not glumping. It's not falling off in chunks or anything like that. And this is really, really close. You can kind of see along there, it's holding a line on the spoon. These are all tests you can kind of do. And really there's no recipe for exactly how much liquid to add into this, because the humidity outside, the humidity of your kitchen is going to change how your flour hydrates. This is just something where you need to kind of add until it feels correct. And this is quite thin. I'm going to let this out a little more, because I like quite a thin batter. Not a lot. Just a little bit more. And there we go. That feels really nice to me. Beautiful. Still holds a line, right? Like when I'm doing this, when I'm looking for it, you do this to test sauces a lot. So I draw it on a spoon, and you see how it's holding like this. If this was super watery, that would just flood the back of the spoon again. This is enough integrity that you can kind of hold it up. And that's perfect. Okay. Sink for now. Okay, so we are now ready to talk about frying the fish. I'm just going to give this a quick little wipe over here. Clean as you go, guys. Clean kitchen, clean mind. Also, make sure you use raw eggs in your batter. Fantastic. Okay, so we did pork sandwiches a couple days ago. And we talked a little bit about frying. That was pan frying, so that was shallow. There was less oil. This is a full-on deep fry situation here. So I've got a high-walled Dutch oven. I filled it up about halfway. I've had this heating for half an hour, 30 minutes or so, just to make sure it's nice and hot for now. If you have a thermometer and a temperature gauge, you want this at 350. That's what you're shooting for here. Again, I would say about 375 would be ideal, because the temperature, like we talked about earlier, you're dropping a big block of cold fish into the hot liquid. It's going to pull in some of that heat. It's going to drop in temperature. And that temperature is really critical for maintaining the crispiness of your batter. This is a little bit more, when it comes to frying it, there's a little less margin for error in terms of we'll go through it, but we're going to drop the fish in and we're going to hold it till one end starts to float, because if we just drop it right in, it will fall to the bottom and it will stick. Not the end of the world, we can deal with that, but in an ideal situation, you want that fish floating the entire time. Also, I'm going to just dry off with my spoons preemptively so we can turn our fish. Let that go there. Okay. You can see how liquidy this is. This is not a super thick batter, but this would be super fluffy, super light, super crispy. So we're going to start frying our fish. Before we do that, I'm just going to kind of lay out the fillets. And they're quite small. I mean, I wish they were bigger, if I'm being honest, but you work with what you have, right? And this isn't a restaurant where I can just send it back to the supplier and complain to them. This is a grocery store, I'm going to do that. So just kosher salt, lightly season on the fish, my version of lightly seasoned. And then, just like before, we've got a wet and a dry hand. We're going to be going, and with this, what I'll usually do is kind of put 2 pieces in.
And what's in the dry bowl?
This is just all-purpose flour. This is just to help the dredge adhere. Just kind of toss this around to get it coated. And you really want to make sure you get off your excess flour. If there's too much flour, that spot will just lift up. And you can see how barely there's any dusting of flour on there. If there's too much flour, that spot will just lift up. And you'll have a bald spot on your dredge. So, going to come over to here. Very wet hand, drop that in. Toss this around. Really make sure it's nice and coated. You're going to let that excess drain off, and this is going to look like there's almost no batter on it. But trust me, it will puff up beautifully. You're going to hit the tail, just calling the tail the bottom piece. You're going to get this in the fryer. Now you see it's reacting. You're not going to drop it. And that's to make sure it stays floating the entire time. I'm going to repeat this. And I'm not trying to keep this hand free of the batter. It's just, that's part of the process. Your fingers are going to be messy. I'm going to put it in. You just slowly drop that in so it stays floating the whole time. Now at this point you can just leave it like this. If you really like the crispy bits, and they do this a lot in tempura shops in Japan, you actually take this and layer your fish with more of these bits. Get it really, really super crispy. And those little bits that fly off, don't throw those out. If they're still good, you can put those on salads, on top of a stir fry, top of a whole bunch of stuff. So a nice dry spoon. We're going to turn this. And we are about 30 seconds-ish away from some really beautiful fish and chips. Just going to cook 2 pieces for now. You can see how much that batter fluffed and expanded. So that's a great sign that you had this really thin coating and it just went whoosh. So it's full of air, it's super light, it's super crispy. And that's what you're looking for in this fish and chips, right? Since it's supposed to be a heavy, there's this thought that you shouldn't feel awful after eating a plate of fish and chips. You shouldn't be eating that much batter. In a really good place, it's light, it's fairly delicate, it's a fairly refined dish. You know? And you can get that way at home. Plus, you're controlling the quality of your fish. You're controlling the batter. You're controlling all of these things. You know? Some really clean oil. Okay. So to get it out, you can use tongs. Just use a spoon carefully. here, right out of the thing. This is where you're going to want to season it. Nice salt on there. There's a lot of fat you're fighting, so you want to go nicely seasoned. And you can see all of the bits. Spot this over here. You can see all of the bits of dropping the tempura in. Beautifully light, super crispy. You can hear it. This is a really, really nice, two nice pieces of fish. And these are the best parts, these little crispy, ethereal little bits on the outside. So, we're going to play one, and I'm going to make it fancy because I'm bored. And I want to make a nice looking plate of food. So, we're going to take our tartar sauce, which is already set slightly. Roll the plate. Generous. Spread out a nice round. Take our fish. You can hear that crunch. So you know it's beautiful and light. Take some of these beautiful fennel fronds. Dill, whatever have you. Let's go about, strew them, and then just finish with a little bit of fresh lemon juice. Okay, so in 26-ish minutes, we've made from scratch tartar sauce. We have butchered and fried up some beautiful fish chips. A homemade batter, and I think that is an acceptable looking plate of food. So thanks for tuning in. If you're cooking along or making the recipes, be sure to tag me at Chase Rose and hashtag Cooking with Chase. And stay home, stay safe, eat well, and see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock where we're making some gourmet souped up instant ramen. Talk to you tomorrow, guys.